My name is Greene Granger. I am Paula Wesselmann's publicist and literary agent. So she has two in one. And today we're actually going to dive deeper into a story behind a story. So I'm really excited, Paula, for you to share a little bit more insight of Apache Fog. So where did the name come from?
Oh, I love the story. There is always a story behind a story. Well, I was in Tucson, Arizona, and I was a young woman then, and I was married to my husband, Jim, and we were watching the news. And the weatherman came on and he started talking about an Apache fog. And I looked at Jim and I said, "Did you hear what he said?" And Jim frowned and I said, "He said an Apache fog." And Jim looked at me and we both looked back at the TV, and I was leaning forward, listening very intently. And the weather broadcaster said, "Now be very careful tomorrow morning while driving. There's going to be a patchy fog." Jim starts laughing. And I look at him like he's crazy. And he says, "Honey, that's not an Apache fog. It's a patchy fog." And while he is laughing, I am sitting there. And in my mind, I see this shaman, an Apache shaman. Now, a shaman is someone who has supernatural powers as well as the power of nature. Okay. So in this vision I get is this shaman is wounded and he's by an aurora, a river, and his enemy is coming to kill him. So he turns to Mother Nature and he says, "Mother Nature, help me. Send me an Apache fog." And a dense fog comes in and surrounds him, and he is saved. Now, I had that vision, and little did I know that years later, I would use it in the amazing story of Apache Fog that teaches kindness and teaches how easy it is to go astray when we are around the wrong kind of people that can make us or show us how to make poor choices instead of good ones when we want to fit in. So that's how Apache Fog came about.
So, but there has to be a deeper story. I love it, but I know there's like a deeper story. So I know your sister Linda.
There's always
no, we gotta go deeper. So I know you're.
Let me go into this. So then after that, not long after that, my sister Linda.
Yeah. So Linda, she's an astrologer.
Yes,
and so like everyone needs to know, like Linda is, I mean, celebrity astrologer, renowned within the world, right?
Yes,
within the world.
Top 10 in the world. Top 10 in the world. She is amazing. At this time in her life, she was studying astrology and really learning. And she had her head, into the books and with people that were really, really brilliant. But one night she had a dream. So the next morning, we always talked in the morning. She called me and she said, "Paula, you're not going to believe this, but I had this dream, and it was a dream about you with the Apaches, and you were meeting a shaman. Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful?" And I said, "Well, okay, then I'll wait to hear what's going to happen, Linda," because I never question things that sort of pop up. And so I had no idea. I said, "But that would be exciting. I love the Native American people. I would love to meet a shaman." She said, "Well, if you do, I'm going with you." I said, "No problem." Well, a few weeks later, Jim and I were visiting one of our favorite places because we lived in Tucson, Arizona. We went to Pine Top in northern Arizona, and we always visited a resort that was run by the Apaches. So Jim is reading a book and I'm sitting there by the fire, and the fire is burned down and it's just the coals now that are burning. And these three Apache women come in and they start making tortillas and cooking them. Well, I love people and I love talking, as you can tell. Yeah. So I started asking them 1,000 questions, and we sat there and we were laughing and talking. And I noticed this tall man was watching us a few minutes, and I was so involved in what they were doing. And he came over and we started talking. And before long, it was like an instant connection. And his name was Glenn Bennett. And His brother was the shaman of the Apache tribe up at Pine Top in that area. So I told him about my sister's dream. And I also told him that Linda and I wanted to write something about the Apaches in a book that we were working on. And so he said, I'm not sure whether my brother will meet with you. He's very, very particular. He said, I could see and I could ask him, but I need to warn you. You could come back up here and he may meet you, but he may only talk to you for a minute and then leave. And you have to accept that. I said, no, that's fine. So we exchanged phone numbers. And a couple of weeks later, Glenn called me and said, my brother will meet with you. Well, call Linda. She flew in from New York. And then we had to go to Pine Top. Well, I had a principal, an amazing man, Joe Marshall, and his wife, Mindy. They gave us a key to their cabin up at Pine Top. So
Oh, that's really nice.
it was like destiny. It just sort of just all panned out. Linda and I were so excited. So the next day we go to Glenn's house. And when we walk in, I learned that Harris, who is the shaman, was just in the kitchen, separate from the family. Glenn had his little boy there, and Sadie, his wife, was, in another room. So I say to Linda, you go in and talk to Harris. She's the astrologer and all of that. I mean, the things I do are a little different from Linda. We're very similar, but we do things in different ways. So I just had a gut feeling she had to be the one to connect with Harris. So I sat on the floor and played with Glenn's boy while Linda went in. And I looked at my watch, counting 60 seconds, and she hadn't come back out. Well, 30, 40 minutes later, she came back out, and Harris joined her. And we were invited the next day to a run for longevity with the his people. They had a special ceremony, the running for longevity. So that next morning we went and we participated and we ran for longevity. And as we passed the elders, they did all these different, sounds and music and everything. And it was a wonderful experience. But that night, we were invited to a special ceremony. So when we got there, it was getting very dark, and they had a very large bonfire. And Linda and I are staring at that bonfire, and we're looking at this sappy wood that is just spreading all these sparks into the sky, and it's getting darker and darker. And I had a sister when I was 16 who died of cancer. And suddenly I'm looking at a spark and I see it rise. And it's like I'm seeing my sister there with me. And it was very emotional. And then suddenly I felt like I was seeing other spirits that were just rising from the fire and that were there and they were with us. So then suddenly, from the west comes these 6 horsemen on bareback. They're bare-chested with makeup on their faces, and they look fierce. And they jump off of their horses, and the horses move forward, and they start dancing and pounding the earth with their feet. And they're dancing and singing and moving, and I'm just spellbound by all of this. And suddenly, I close my eyes and I say a prayer for my family and for all my worries and fears. And I'm there praying. And then suddenly I open my eyes. And right before me, not more than 8 inches away, is one of the dancers. And he's staring straight into my eyes. And I don't move, and either does he. And Linda's frozen next to me. And then suddenly he turns around and he starts dancing and pounding the earth again. And I'm in shock, and Linda's looking at me and I'm looking at her. And it was as if I was given a blessing. There were so many blessings on this trip. So then in the evening, Harris invited us in to the teepee that they had, where they had a fire in the middle. And they had a lot of the elders sitting there. And we sat with the elders, and they told us many stories. One, very briefly, was about this terrible fire they were having in Pine Top. And Harris called the Apache people, and they all stood before the fire and raised their hands and sang to the fire and asked Mother Nature for help. And believe it or not, fire stopped and moved in another direction. So many beautiful stories. Some people will say, oh, that's not possible. Anything is possible.
You know, Paula? Okay.
Yes, no, just when you feel it or you see it or you feel it in your heart.
You know,
So, go ahead.
you know, I feel that, and I want everyone to hear this too, because one thing about you, Paula, as an author, creator, an actress, mother, grandmother, is one of the many things I love about you is that you love to immerse yourself into the topic before you even write about it. So it's not that you're just thinking of a story and you're writing, oh, let's meet this way. No, it's experiential that you dealt with before you decided to write away. And I want everyone to know that, so they know there's an authentic part of each one of your stories that you've created throughout your whole life, that you've actually, like, you experienced it.
Right, right. You know, this is another story I never really told you, but years and years ago, I met one of the greatest agents of all time, Bertha Klausner. She was a very elderly woman when I met her. And she's the one who got me started on writing. I had written a little children's story about grammar with 3 little characters, and she really loved it. And when I was in New York, she wanted to meet with me. Well, during that time, she had learned about, as we sat over lunch, she learned about all my adventures and all my experiences that I had had. And, you know, I was still very young, but I'd lived a lifetime. And she said, you know, Paula, she said, it's very hard to break in with children's stories right now. You know what I would like you to do? I would like you to write a story about your life. She said, because when you're writing about what you know, the reader knows. When you write about something that is make-believe or something you haven't experienced, they feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So always write about things that you feel deeply about and that you know. Well, that had a tremendous effect on me over the years, you know, as I explored different forms of writing. And so what you're saying there, yes, about experience, children need to get out there and look at things, feel things, be a part of things, because the simplest thing can become a very special moment that they may use later in life by just observing it and feeling it and being part of it. So, do you want me to tell you the second part of what happened?
Of course. Everyone has to.
Well, this trip was amazing. Because we had this very special connection, a very loving, respectful connection with Harris and Glenn, the brothers. Glenn was given permission by Harris to take us the next day, the first, as you would say, white man to enter the sacred land. So this was a great honor. But the story behind this was, many years ago when the Apaches were moving into this land, they were looking for a sacred spot. So the chief and the shaman sent a group of their warriors out to find the sacred land. And the shaman said, you will find it. I know you will. Just look and listen, and you will find what you are seeking. So 7 days they were out there, nothing. The warriors were exhausted for riding and looking. They could not find the sacred land where their people would be safe and that they could worship. Then suddenly, this flock of birds appeared in the tree. And the leader of the group looked at the birds and remembered what the shaman had said. Now remember, nature, according to the is the power to the Apaches, the things of nature. So this leader says, we must follow the birds. So the birds suddenly take flight, and the Apaches jump on their horses. For 2 days, they follow the birds, and the birds don't leave them. Suddenly, the birds land in this open space, and that's the sacred land that they found. Now, when Glenn took us there, I mean, this is almost unbelievable, but I saw it with my own eyes. It is the 4 directions, okay? But on one of the directions, and I think it was in the east, I can't remember, I think it's the east, there was a rose vine that had grown over this arch that they had at the entrance. And Glenn said, we never planted it. And it always produces these little roses. And I couldn't believe it. So anyway, I enter through this arch and I stand in the middle of the 4 directions. And Glenn has me face each direction. And as I face each direction and I stand there and close my eyes and I say my prayers, he is singing and making certain noises, and I can't even describe it, but it was beautiful. And each time I turned and he told me to turn, he also sang something else until I was done with the 4 directions. And then Linda did the same, but it was one of the most powerful and beautiful experiences I had ever had. And I was very grateful to having known Glenn. Now, Glenn and I hadn't talked with each other for a very long time. And then this year, Linda and I reconnected with him, and he was ill. And we were actually doing a lot of prayers for him. And he wanted to come and see me. And I was hoping that this summer that he would be visiting me and we would be looking out my window, you know, at all the turkeys and the coyotes and the deer, and we would have our special moment again together. But he passed, and but he's with me. He's with me, and I feel him. And the fact that we reconnected and that I was able to talk with him before he passed was a blessing in itself. So the story Apache Fog, in the story, I have Tatlisham, and his great-great-grandfather was the one who called upon for the Apache Fog. And Taklisham's name is a gray fog. So the story starts with this. And then, of course, there's just one adventure after another. And of course, the little enemy in this one is Witch Rachel, trying to destroy everything that Pumpkin Pete tries to do that is good. But there's a few very scary moments here. And it also shows in the story, which I talk about later, that a simple act of kindness can change someone's life. And sometimes, and it is returned to you, not always by the person that you give it to, but by someone else sometimes when you least expect it. And sometimes it's also given to you and returned to you from the person that you gave it to. So that is the story with my Apache friends.
I think that's so beautiful. And I hope anyone who's watching this feels inspired by just that gentle bit of kindness does go a long way, and it can turn into a relationship.
Well, look what happened just sitting with the 3 Apache women, and I was so excited about the tortillas. But I always get excited about anything with cooking and stuff. And then Glenn and I, you know, it's so it's so funny how you can meet somebody, a total stranger, and there's a connection that you can't explain. You and I have it. Yeah. We just naturally have it. We've always had it. There's a great kindness in you, and a wonderful love that you have, and that love and kindness that is in me is what connects us. Yeah. And Glenn and I just I don't know. And it was that connection I had in Linda's dream that gave us a lifetime experience that we cherished. Now, I've ran for longevity, so I hope to be here at 105. So my grandson James says I have to.
It'll be golden.
Oh, anyway.
That's like in 50 years, whatever. Well, I'm so excited we had this conversation, and I hope everyone feels inspired. Make sure that you subscribe to this channel. You just click the link below, subscribe, and also make sure you head over to the Apache Fog story that she is sharing with her grandson, James. So until next time, right? Until
next time, we'll figure out something.
Another story behind the story one of these days, but just stay tuned, everyone.
Bye.